started at the RSP Autumn Conference. So, not that many. Okay, so I will give you a bit more detail about the kind of repository landscape and our view of where this has been going and how we've been running the project. Because selfishly, what I'd also like to do is give you an idea of some of the things that I've learned from a very steep learning curve over the last 2 weeks, where I think it's going and where I think institutional repositories sit within all this. But obviously I'm still taking a view, so I would quite like to have some kind of questions and answers or kind of informal discussion over lunch and coffee, just to try to get some more of these ideas and requirements and functionality and views on where all this stuff is going, because we talk about tipping points and we talk about killer apps, and it's all changing and it's all happening very, very quickly. But one of the things that I've been questioning is where actually are we in the process? Because, you know, way back in the mid-90s, I was working with Elsevier in Amsterdam, and a lot of the smart guys at Elsevier, the great devil, they were seeing that the business landscape was going to be changing very, very quickly. So we were working to get together DTDs, digitize the content, get it into SGML. So waiting for the day when the internet was going to be coming, because we knew that it was all going to change. And one of the things that I found quite astonishing is that that was 16, 17 years ago, and it's not really changed yet. And that's the big question that's always sitting in my mind, that you can see a lot of very useful things happening, and what we're doing with RepositoryNet and creating tools to lower the barriers to open access is going to be helpful, but I'm quite impatient to see that tipping point come quite quickly. So that's one of the things I want to cover during the course of the talk. So as I say, background and rationale behind the project, who's involved in the project, the high-level plan, what we've been doing with stakeholder analysis, and quite a lot of the stakeholder analysis has been with repository managers to start off with. What we're doing with Wave 1 and Wave 2, so Wave 1 of the project basically runs up until September this year, which will be fairly simple, as using a lot of the existing tools and putting service level agreements and some kind of contractual framework around that. Wave 2 is much more exciting, because that's when the rubber really hits the road, in terms of actually getting things much more closely integrated together with the different components. Then I'd like to look at what's actually out there at the moment, what's happening with open access publishing, particularly in the States, because it might be that there's a model there which could be useful for repositories to work within as a framework for curating, preserving, but also possibly publishing and getting information out there. And then I'll finish off with a quick summary. So background to the project, way before I ever came on board, JISC ran the original RepositoryNet, and there's been a lot of good stuff that's come out of that. So we've got Open Depot, which is something that we run at EDINA, which is a virtual repository primarily for people who work for smaller institutions who actually don't have a repository that they can actually go to, and that's we've continued to fund that internally. That is still running. We've got the IRS project, which is the discoverability search engine, being run out of Minas in Manchester. The RSP, which obviously is still going, and then initiatives like SOR, for example, which has been quite successful. That's in place. So when I came into the project originally, I kind of thought it's quite optimistic that a lot of the building blocks are already in place. So all we need to do is to put them all together, and it'll go off and run. So what we're looking to do with UK RepositoryNet essentially is to build a common platform for everybody to use. So what we want to do is we want to enable institutions to run your systems more efficiently and provide a national shared network on one common platform. So consolidating the existing tools that are out there at the moment, which I'll tell you about in the course of the talk, and develop new services around that. Now, new services might be new feature sets for searching and discovery, for example. It might be new ways of aggregating metadata, pulling it together. It might be new curation and preservation services that can come through institutional repositories. And a lot of our requirements gathering between now and September 2012 is going to be focused into delving quite deeply into what these are going to be with their various stakeholder groups, of which obviously IR's institution repositories is one of them. Want to enable ease of use of shared services, so that is in terms of UIs and making it simple for people to deposit, to search, to access naming authorities, all of the stuff that goes around depositing, searching for content, finding content, putting stuff back into the CRIS. Try to make that as simple as possible in terms of a way of navigating around all of these different functions. And then lastly, to scope new business models to make the services sustainable, because we're very aware that JISC probably aren't going to keep on funding a lot of these services forever and ever and ever. So we need to work with some of the service providers in finding alternative ways of funding the services, whether it's through subscriptions or pay-as-you-go, or whatever it is. We need to try to find ways of getting ourselves off the JISC teat within the next 5 to 10 years. So who's involved? Well, obviously JISC are giving the funding for this. We're meeting with the JISC oversight group on Monday, Lancaster Gate. So literally everything is in big flux at the moment. We've put together our recommendations for how we see UK RepositoryNet working. We fed that into the guys of the oversight group. They've digested it. So Monday's our big day that Peter Burnhall and I will be going in and meeting the guys from JISC and presenting our recommendations, and we'll hear back probably by Tuesday on what's happening in terms of funding for these. Obviously my organisation, EDINA, we're involved both as in terms of running the project, but also in terms of providing some of the service components that go into UK RepositoryNet. Then we've got what we call the Services and Innovation Partner Group. So these are people who are providing the services. So it's people like Mimas in Manchester, Nottingham and Southampton universities, UCOLN and Bath, who are both providing services and also providing what we call the Innovation Zone, which is basically a development sandpit where we can put a lot of the code, play around with it, and then bring it into service when it's actually production ready and is sustainable. So these are the big players. In terms of a high-level plan, I took this from our original project initiation document, and at a high level it's remained remarkably the same. So where we are at the moment is the middle one. That's the thing. Yeah. So where we are at the middle, basically slightly ahead of the game. We've done all of the stakeholder analysis, which is getting together our user requirements. From that, we've created some functional requirements, which we've got by working with the people in the SIPG, the service providers. And we've got to the stage now where we have selected the components that we want to use as part of the common platform, and we, as I say, presenting that to JISC. Provided that all goes ahead, and no reason to think it won't, we then move into wave one of the implementation, which we've kind of knocked around different ways we can do this. In terms of simply the time pressures to get this stuff together, wave one probably will be quite simply a number of contracts that we, as EDINA, will drop with the service component providers to give us the service. So it'll be things like, how often the service is going to stay up for, how the help desk is going to work, centralised place for telephone calls and emails to come into, so that we can start to monitor the success of the project and getting a common reporting mechanism in place so that we can start to measure ourselves in terms of things like the number of downloads we're getting, the number of uploads into the repository, all of the KPIs that we have sitting around this project. So for each individual service or functional area, defining a number of KPIs, making sure the service providers keep to these KPIs. So a fairly loose framework. Implementation of Wave 2, which starts in September, as I say, that will become much more interesting, because what we then move towards is a more integrated production environment, which from the point of view of the users becomes a lot less fragmented, it becomes a lot easier to use. So in terms of stakeholder analysis, we've got a pretty good, fairly good institutional view. So we went out, we talked to a lot of your guys after the, after and during the RSP conference. So can I just do a quick straw poll? How many people talked to our consultants at Glen Afric? That's good. So you'll know all about the repository landscape and so on. We'd like to broaden that out a little bit, and also talk to the research administrators. And I was very interested in some of the points about ARMA and the CRIS and how all of this pulls together, because a lot of the interviews that we've done with the research management people are kind of halfway through. So none of these conversations were included in the interim report that we gave to JISC. And there's a lot of stuff that's been falling out of that. I just met with Glen Afric yesterday afternoon for the first time. There's a lot of good stuff in there that we can use to help to drive user requirements. Likewise, the researchers, we've talked to, or our consultants have talked to not very many PIs. And I've had quite a few informal discussions with friends and colleagues. When I'm a project manager on this, on UK RepositoryNet, he himself is a PI, so he runs research projects. So it's been very interesting for me in EDINA, with my background in publishing, with Terry's background as a PI, and also talking to the guys who sit opposite us who run the EDINA data library. So we've got kind of 3 points of the stakeholder framework sitting informally in one room. So it's been quite interesting getting input from all of these guys and putting it together and taking another view of what the repository landscape actually looks like. But Glen Afric will be doing this for us. We've also contracted with Key Perspectives Limited, and they've been talking to the research funders, people like RCUK, the Wellcome Trust, and also the academic publishers, the really bold academic publishers. So what did we learn from that? Well, it was great getting all of the input from you guys and pulling all of this stuff together. But what it showed us was that the view that we have of the repository landscape, which we'll be talking about in more detail, it proved our initial theory was correct, which, as any good Papirian will tell you, is of fairly limited use, because what you really want is your theory to be refuted and to find other ways of coming into that information. So it assured us that there were no gaps that we missed in terms of the landscape, which is quite reassuring. So we know that we've covered all the stakeholders. We know we've got a broad understanding of how this whole supply chain works. But it didn't really provide us with any really new detailed feature sets that we could take forward over and above what we have from the existing component service providers. So how do we take this forward? Well, one of the things that I want to be doing between now and September is refocusing our consultants for the final report, because the timescales have been quite crushed on the project. We had to pull together an interim report in December, which was obviously quite partial because a lot of the interviews haven't been completed. So it had a lot of good information from you guys, from the repository managers, a lot of good stuff from the publishers, had a lot of good stuff from the funding bodies, but we were lacking that crucial point, which is the RI and the research managers, which I think will give us a much more complete view of what the stakeholders' analysis are in terms of the landscape. And the way that I want to do it is just the classic thing. You want to start to do use cases around different functionality, around different functional areas, to try to drive out further requirements over and above what we've got at the moment with the tools that are provided. So in terms of defining Wave 2 functionality, all the stuff that starts from September going forward, we want to, first of all, define the functionality. So look at things like curation microservices in a fair amount of detail so that we know roughly what we want to build within that. And then the feature set is built out in an integrated platform between September 12 and March 2013. So I keep on talking about this landscape because I must admit I'd assumed that more people would be familiar with the landscape. So this is what it looks like. Okay, so it's a bit of a mess. And what I've been finding is it's much more fragmented, perhaps, than I had originally believed, or maybe different people in these different areas had ever believed. So just to take you through this very quickly, what this is the supply chain of how research papers are disseminated. So we start off down here with the funding bodies who will have some kind of open access mandate. So if I go into Juliet and I look in Juliet and I look at all of the Wellcome Trusts and all these research funders, it all looks great because everybody's got nice green lights for open access. So everything looks okay down there. And of course what these guys are primarily interested in are the metrics, the research outcomes that are coming into this, because they get an idea of how many bucks they're getting for their bang. The problem is, actually on the ground, if you talk to some PIs, that the open access mandate can often be very fuzzy. So if you're running, if I'm an epidemiologist and I've got £1 million that's come through from Wellcome Trust, I'm running a project across the US and Canada, what I'm asked to do by my funder is to publish maybe 20% in impact level 4 journals and 30% in impact level 2 and around that, and maybe 50% in the more specialised, lower impact journals. It's, as we say in German, it's very schwammig. It's very hard to actually measure that. And it's very hard for the guys who are running projects to report on that in any degree of detail, because they don't know how many research articles are going to come out of the project. It might be 20, it might be 30, but they're mainly making sure they get into the primary journal so they can then report back to their funder and say, yeah, we've done this, we've ticked the box. And the danger is it then goes into a paper document and sits in the file and nobody knows anything about it. So that's kind of the problem down here. Then we've got the guys without whom none of this could work. The primary investigators, the researchers, and the authors. And I've broken this up down into two levels, because up at the top here, we've got the peer review process, which publishers don't pay for. We pay for it, taxpayers pay for it. It's something that happens as part of a public service. So within the university community, there's lots of value being added to the stuff up here, and the stuff is actually being created down here. So author then deposits the author's final copy, post-print into Serif. They'll sometimes put it into the institutional repository, but the main thing that they want to do is they want to give it to the journal, because then they've ticked the box with their funder. So publisher then adds a small amount of added value, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail, and it goes into publisher's final copy, where hopefully it will find its way into your institution if you subscribe to the journal. Hopefully it will find its way into UK PMC, so it's there for open access. It doesn't always happen, and hopefully it gets from UK PMC into the institutional repository, but not always. And then down here, you've got the UKITL, the institutional repository, so we've got UKCoRR and ARMOR here, and I think one of what's come out of the discussion this morning, one of the main drivers there is Chris and research management, and proving to the VP type levels within the university that the repository is absolutely crucial. Now, one of the things that I find slightly frustrating, I shall go and do, this is my simplified view of the repository landscape, which I probably should have done right at the beginning actually, because it saves everyone having to strain their eyes. So all of the stakeholders in here, and what they're interested in is publishers are interested or not interested, but actually they have to be interested because it's all happening anyway. Open access is happening anyway, whether publishers like it or not. So they've got to have an interest in that. And obviously down here, the research guys, funders repository, they're interested in research information management, and the JISC and the Event and all of that good stuff. So one of the things that I found when I've been kind of cycling around this supply chain over the last 2 weeks or so, is it's a little bit unclear where the tipping point is and where, in software I used to call it the killer app. Where's the killer app in this stuff? Which levers do you have to pull, or where do you have to put the pressure, or where do you create the incentive to suddenly make all this stuff happen? Because what we're doing with UK RepositoryNet is we're building lots of brilliant tools. I'll go into more detail about what these tools are. But all that we're doing is, say, we're lowering the barriers, we're making it simpler for open access to happen. But there's all sorts of areas that we don't control. So we've got really very little influence down here. I guess through JISC we've got a little bit, but some things out with our control. But I'm thinking there must be something that we can do, or we can help to do, or we can concentrate our resources on to suddenly make this stuff happen. And I'm thinking at the minute that maybe this area up here, the PIs, and people who are actually creating content, might be the key to where it all happens, because there are members of institutions. Institutions have to go through the ref. There's kind of there's a food chain there that we can take advantage of in order to make this happen, so that when mandates happen and if mandates are enforced, then this whole thing, the tipping point is suddenly reached and we're there, it's all working. So in terms of functional requirements, what we've been doing when we've been doing our requirements gathering is, first of all, we give awareness of what is out there, because not everybody knows that there's a core and a ROR and an Open Depot and ORG Junction and all of this good stuff. So kind of raising awareness of what's out there, asking the questions of, okay, we've got a couple of registries, what do the registries actually do, who uses the registries, do we need them, what's the core functionality of the registries that we're after to make this happen. Then there's depositing the content in the appropriate location. So that's where things like our Open Depot at EDINA comes in. It's where the open access broker comes from, just to make it easier for publishers, because publishers are also a key, maybe not a key, but they're a stakeholder in this. So we want to make it as easy as possible for publishers to get their digital bundle and their DOIs and all the good stuff that publishers do into the correct institutional repository as a service to their authors, first of all, because the authors provide an awful lot for fee to our publishers, and secondly, because they're mandated to by the funding bodies. Then enhancing the quality of what's held. So enhancing the quality means making the metadata better, either through automatic harvesting of metadata or curation of metadata, and trying to pull in useful tools that encourage full text searching and upload, greater availability of full text, because I know from my background in publishing that my crusade over the last 3 or 4 years with publishers, I've got to say it's been like pushing an open door, is we've got to get our XML done. We've got to do the tagging up front, we've got to make it part of the copy editing process. We need to make sure that we've got a digital bundle that has got everything that we need, so we can put the stuff up on Amazon, we can upload it into Waterstones, we can have it available for open access. And publishers have been great at coming along that road, partly because they have to, but it's a very easy argument to make, a very easy argument to win. So what you will be finding, and I'm sure that you're aware of this, is there's going to be more and more full text content. It's maybe not open access, but it's there. It is being captured, it's being provided, and the quality and the extent of that has been really going up in the last 3 or 4 years. Then there's making use of what is held. So making use, I mean the researchers, the guys who are coming into your databases who are, that's all about discoverability, is finding the article that you want, finding related articles around that through semantic searching, whatever, making the content useful for the primary users who are the guys who are doing the research. Then there's analysis, analysing what is held and how often it's used. So we've got various tools that we're building through IRIS UK, various other things, which will help that kind of statistical analysis that will then start to allow benchmarking of repositories, benchmarking of institutions, and getting good data to feed back into the TRIS, because I'm not altogether sure whether we, as the word community, but as in the academic world, whether we want to be beholden to Thomson Reuters and Web of Science forever and ever and ever. Maybe we want to have that held as something that's an open source that is owned by the public, by the taxpayer. Then there's protecting what's held over time, so that's curation, preservation of documents, and then holding content. So it's things like hosting services that we do within EDINA for data librarians. So it's looking at all of these functional areas and pulling out functional requirements, putting it down in a way that is easily digestible without getting too technical, and getting a clear path forward for what we're going to build in the future. So I hate people who also say busy slide, but I'll take you through this because it gives you an idea of who the players are within the landscape and the different tools. So up here, you won't be able to read it, so I'll take you through the yellow bits. So here, relate to search aggregation and text mining. So that's all about discoverability of content. Then the green bits are all about, this is IRIS UK, this is about statistics, reporting, benchmarking. Orange bits up here is registries, so we've got Open Door, we've got ROAR, and then we've got an initiative we've got at EDINA, which is ORI. So we've got 3 service providers there for one functional area. Then blue bit, we've got deposit tools, so there's Romeo and Juliet, and there's our Open Depot, and the open access broker that we run at EDINA. And then finally we've got what I call metadata quality. Essentially, it's providing an authoritative names database down here. So we've got a little project running here, which will feed into the whole platform. So you can see just from that, it's quite busy. And what we got was we've had business proposals in from all of these different bodies who will be the service providers for all of these different functional areas, for lots of different tools that do different things across the functional area. So kind of a quick component summary. In terms of search, we've got IRS, that's the big monster in the block, that's the search engine that's most commonly used. And the great thing about IRS is it goes across all institutional repositories, whether they're open access or not. So everybody uses IRS, so we've got to build on the basis of IRS. There's also another service called CoRR, which concentrates more on open access repositories. And what that does is it does good service on full text mining and aggregation of metadata. So we feel that combining the best part of CoRR on open access, combining that with what IRS gives us in terms of universality is a pretty good fit. Then there's another project that's being run out of UCOM, Bath, which is Rep UK, and that essentially is a kind of development tool. So what that does is it pulls off a set of aggregated metadata, makes that metadata open to a developer, so developers can start to do very interesting, useful things with the metadata, and then roll that into a kind of production environment. So that's quite useful as almost like a research project. Then there's my blue area, the deposit tool, so we've got Romeo, I think everyone's familiar with Romeo, Juliet, Open Depots, talked about the broker, which identifies the relevant repositories. It helps people to deposit articles into the relevant repositories. Then you've got, up here you've got your different registries, so Open Door is manually curated, so they're taking the harvesting the metadata, looking at the metadata, manually improving the metadata, very good service. ROAR is more about crowdsourcing, so a tool that automatically pulls metadata from all the institutional repositories and goes through some nice algorithms to start enriching that a little bit. Then there's ORI, which is the tool that we have at EDINA, which takes an institutional view of repositories rather than a repository view. So that just looks at all of the academic institutions worldwide, tells you how many repositories that there are related to that, and helps you to deposit them in the right place. Then there's IRIS UK, which provides the stats, and then there's Names UK, which provides the naming authority. So it's a very quick run through that landscape. Now, the problem that we've got, or the challenge that we have, is, as you can imagine, there's lots and lots of shared functionality there. So I've highlighted up here what I call 2 collision points, where we've got quite a lot of shared functionality. So this is what we need to resolve from the project. What's the best functional set? Who provides the best of breed? How do we pull it together? How do we put it onto one platform? How do we run this so that we've got the best possible function set as easy as possible for people to access? Then up here within the registries, you've got another collision point because you have different people doing different things and contributing different kind of USPs to the registry service, but how do we pull it all together? How do we make it work? So that's going to be our job for the next 6 months or so, is pulling all of that stuff together. There are other bits that are a lot more simple because we've only got one naming authority with Names 2, we've only got one stat service with IRIS, and Romeo and Juliet they provide complementary services to Open Depot and the repository broker, which kind of work quite closely together anyway. So in terms of the component selection, we've made sure that it is very, very open, it's accountable. We've done all sorts of nice evaluation matrix for the JISC guys so that everybody can see that nobody's being left out for shadowy reasons. It's all totally transparent. We've finished the evidence gathering. We go in on Monday, we'll find out on Monday what's going to be happening with the project. So it's quite a key time at the minute. Okay, I'll take questions at the end, but that's an overview of the landscape. As you can see, it's very busy, it's very complex. It gives a very comprehensive set of tools to address all of the areas that we've identified in the repository landscape, and I think it's pretty good for going forward. But as I say, what I'm concerned with is the tipping point. One of the things that I've been looking at in terms of open access publishing is what's happening across the pond with PubMed Central, and particularly the Public Library of Science. How many of you guys are familiar with Public Library of Science? Yeah, it's almost everybody. What I loved about this stuff is what we see here. What happened in the last 2 quarters of last year, 2011, is the number of publications within PAWS it doubled. The whole thing doubled in a period of about 6 months. So I'm thinking this is kind of people doing it for themselves because it's open access publishing. It provides really, really good article metrics on downloads and citations. So if I drill into an article, here's the full text of articles on this tab here, but these are the metrics. So it's very simple to see. And there's my citations, which have all come through World of Science and Google and all the rest of it. So it's obviously very popular, it's being used. It ticks most of the boxes that we identified within the repository landscape because it's giving us our metrics. It's providing open access, it's open to researchers, the metadata is really, really good. So everything in the garden looks rosy. A couple of points, interesting talking to Erica, that's something I've just learned. Open access doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go into an institutional repository. So there's a potential gap. The other thing it's leaving out is my friends the publishers, because they're not involved in this. Everything's being peer reviewed. It doesn't need to be copy edited because it's biomedicine, and generally I find anything in the scientific field doesn't need an awful lot of copy editing. Stuff in humanities and grey literature, there's a heavy load in copy editing, and publishers are actually adding a lot more there in terms of added value. So, but in here, what we call the author's final copy is probably pretty good, and it's doing a good job, because the stuff's being cited, and it's being used, and people are publishing on it. So what the publishers are doing, and this is the other interesting thing, is the number of copycat publishers that are suddenly going open access. And this is also increasing quite exponentially. So the criterion is they're included if they don't filter articles for publication based on perceived importance or interest. Because the great thing about PLOS is, because it's kind of virtual, it's transparent, you can see immediately what the impact is. You can see what the impact level is on individual articles, individual scholars and individual institutions. Now that's really, really good. It's not a perceived impact level of a journal anymore. That's brilliant. And what's interesting is guys like Sage, guys like Nature Publishing Group, guys like Springer Verlag, all beginning to have open access journals. And in my informal discussions with academic publishers, everybody needs to do it because they need to get on board. So they know that the business model is changing. And the 34 or 45% ROI, which has been going on for the last 45 years since the end of the war, 50 years, it's going to change. So everyone knows that. So this will be happening anyway. My question is, how do we make that happen more quickly? And that's still a big kind of question that's sitting in our minds in the project. It's going to be very much front of mind for you guys, particularly with Ref and Chris. And I'm still questioning about it, and probably will be for the next 6 months or so. But if anyone's got a silver bullet or a golden key or whatever, then please tell me, because as I say, we can't influence key stakeholders of Airplay, but what we can do is we can focus our efforts on the kind of tools, the kind of services around these areas of deposit and searching and statistics that will help to make this happen much, much more quickly. So very open to hearing anybody's opinions about how that actually works. So as I say, what we're about is stopping it all going into the fire, building sustainable shared services for you guys and other stakeholders that are out there. Say we've completed the scoping stage, and the services will start being delivered in March. So hopefully all this will start happening very, very quickly. I've got about 3 minutes to take questions, so if anyone's got any immediate questions, then please throw them out there.